In the last 3 months, we've looked at a pair of conversions to Christianity. The former fifth horse person of the new atheist apocalypse, Ayaan Hirsi, and more recently, philosopher Phillip Goff. Ayaan's initial statement on her conversion seemed far more political than faith-based, and Goff's conversion strips Christianity of God's omnipotence, the physical resurrection of Jesus, and penal substitution, the core of Christian redemptive theology. In reading the essays written by both Goff and Ali, explaining their thinking, and then in listening to the various interviews they've done going into greater detail about the change in their thinking, I've noticed a common thread that really does seem to be at the heart of what divides people like me, skeptics, atheists, non-believers, from people like Ayaan and Phillip. It really does come down to just one word: more. Take a listen to Ayaan in her conversation with Richard Dawkins and see if you can catch it.
Well, I must say, I've never met a vicar that I didn't like. I mean, they're always very, very nice people.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the stuff they believe is obvious nonsense. And you have to take the whole package, because when you talked about Jesus rising from the dead, you don't believe Jesus rose from the dead, surely.
I choose to believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
You choose to believe it?
Yes, and that is a matter of choice. And it's a matter, I think it has to go back to, is there something or is there nothing? And I think you start with, there is nothing. And yes, for years I agreed with you, there's nothing. But if you come round to the idea that there might be something much more powerful than we are, something that caused everything else, then something like Jesus rising out of the dead, or these other miracles, Jesus being born out of a virgin, for that higher power is not a big deal.
Goff, briefly, almost tangentially, alludes to the same thing in his essay, and it seems to be at the core of what drives him towards his embrace of theism. Despite rejecting religion, I always had a spiritual sense, a sense of a greater reality at the core of things, what William James called, quote, the more, end quote. That more is something beyond the natural world we live in. It's the idea that something or someone is behind all of this, and that this thing or person has crafted everything to be as it is. This more is rarely the God of deism, a God who starts things off and then sits back with no intention of doing anything more. As Ayaan says, this something more has power beyond our comprehension, perhaps all power, which makes anything and everything possible. For this powerful more, things like creating an entire universe or bringing a person back from the dead are, as Ayaan says,
not a big deal.
In this idea, Goff and Ayaan might be at odds. Goff's God is not all-powerful. He's somehow powerful enough to create the entire universe from nothing, but not powerful enough to create a world where evil is constrained. Goff's God was obliged to use the brutal process of nature, which his God allegedly concocted to bring about intelligent life. Neither Goff nor Ayaan offer actual evidence of this more. And in reading both of their essays, it's clear to me that this more is something in which they both desperately wanted to believe. And that's the whole ballgame, really. When want is your motivation, when you desperately desire to believe a thing, nothing more is needed, pun intended. Nor will anything divert one's gaze. Excusegetics takes over at that point, and all evidence to the contrary will be explained away with ease. They've both embraced the more as an explanation for everything, which explains nothing. This more is nothing more than a belief in magic, a surrender of reason to the unfalsifiable and inexplicable. Ayaan has chosen to believe that Jesus was raised from the dead because of course, something more powerful than we are can and would apparently want to do such a thing. Right. What this more doesn't seem interested in, What does seem, in Ayaan's words, to be a big deal is putting an end to the distended bellies of 5-year-old children who will starve to death in the coming months, never knowing anything but hunger. Or the rape of small children by Catholic priests, or bringing those priests to justice in this life. Goff's magical being finds it not a big deal to create everything from nothing, but apparently it's a huge fucking deal to create that universe sans evil. For both of them, this magical Moor sits by, arms folded as Hitch imagined, watching as the animals, who are not made in the image of the Moor, suffer for 800 million years, while the Moor is forced to use the brutal process of natural selection to create the ultimate desire of the Moor's heart. Homo sapiens, whose hearts, even after nearly 14 billion years of that brutal process, are still filled with evil from their youth, as the not-so-good book says. Then the Moor sits back and watches holocausts, wars, torture, rape, natural disasters, all of which cause the Moor's desired species, us, to suffer, and that Moor can either do nothing about it, as Goff imagines, or in Ayaan's case, clearly chooses not to. From this, Goff and Ayaan both nonchalantly find their way somehow, bewilderingly, to comfort, peace, and reassurance. This is not a thinking person's game, my friends, nor is it the road to compassion or empathy for anyone but oneself. If you want there to be more, if you need and want that to explain the realities you otherwise can't endure, there is always more to be had. And if that's the case, better to pick something more which can't be demonstrated or examined, right? What better to project one's hopes and desires onto than something beyond our introspection and inquiry? What more can one ask? Once again, I'm me. Thanks for watching.